Dirt Rider's 2023 450 Motocross Shootout was one of the most exciting in recent memory, with half the field receiving complete overhauls. Yamaha's YZ450F brought the most anticipation due to its extensive updates and arriving later than the rest, while KTM's 450 SXF and Husqvarna's FC450 were somewhat familiar due to them being based on the special edition models from 2022. Honda's CRF450R was granted mid-generation updates to the engine, suspension, and chassis. Aside from different tires and radiator shroud graphics, Kawasaki's KX450 arrived identical to last year, and the GasGas MC 450F was given only cosmetic changes as well. We measured seat heights, applied DecalWorks pre-printed number plate backgrounds, and installed fresh Dunlop Geomax MX33 tires to ensure consistency and traction among them for the entirety of the test. Without further ado, here's how the bikes stacked up. Finishing in 6th place is the Honda CRF450R. On the Dirt Rider dyno, it produces 52.5 horsepower and 35.1 pound-feet of torque, ranking it 5th in peak horsepower and 1st in maximum torque. The Honda's power delivery is one of the smoothest in the class, with a controllable low end that transitions into a strong mid-range and top end. 3 engine modes and 3 levels of torque control are effective, but toggling through them via the handlebar-mounted electronic suite can be a bit tedious. Aside from having a slightly firm pull, the Nissan hydraulic clutch system doesn't miss a beat. Honda once again improved the suspension settings on its flagship motocrosser, but dialing in the Showa 49mm coil spring fork and Showa shocks still takes some work. In stock trim, the fork travels too low in the stroke, which makes it feel stiff. Going in on fork compression helps prevent that and reduces some pitching. Shock action is inconsistent, especially when hitting bumps. These Showa components have the potential to be great, but lack comfort in stock trim. At 245 pounds wet on our automotive scales, the CRF450R is the heaviest bike in this comparison, but you wouldn't assume that after riding it. This is one sharp, nimble, and responsive motorcycle. Although handling is improved for 2023, it can still become uncontrollable out of nowhere. Ergonomics are some of the best, but the CRF450R still has the most rigid chassis of the bikes gathered here, which becomes all too apparent when the track gets rough. Despite being better than the 2022 model, Big Red is still temperamental with setup and the most difficult and intimidating bike to ride at race pace. Slotting into 5th place is the GasGas MC 450F. On our in-house dyno, it makes 53 horsepower and 33.9 pound-feet of torque. With those figures, the red Austrian sits 4th in peak horsepower and 2nd in maximum torque. Power delivery is the mellowest in the class, but very broad. It's soft off the bottom, picks up in the mid-range, and revs to the moon. Throttle response is a bit sluggish compared to the competition. In stock trim, this is a great engine package for novice level and vet riders, as it's user-friendly and easy to control. The GasGas is also the only 450 motocross bike to not offer any sort of EFI tunability off the showroom floor. Just like the KTM and Husqvarna, it transmits the most engine vibration through the handlebar and foot pegs. The MC 450F's suspension is soft. Valving in the WP Exact 48mm fork is more compliant than its orange and white Austrian counterparts. Fork air pressure adjustability is advantageous, as faster and heavier riders will need to make it firmer by going above the recommended stock setting of 10.7 bar. The ability to make fork compression and rebound adjustments by hand is a convenience everyone can appreciate. The WP Exact Shock's 42 Nm spring is softer than the 45 Nm spring spec'd on the KTM and Husqvarna, which isn't well suited for those who weigh 175 pounds or more. We appreciate how plush the GasGas's suspension is, but its spongy and springy setup limits overall performance. For the 2nd year in a row, GasGas can claim it has the lightest 450 motocross bike on the market, with its MC 450F hitting the Dirt Rider scales at 234 pounds wet. Being spec'd with the 2019 to 2022 KTM 450 SXF frame and subframe, the same swing arm as the prior generation Husqvarna FC 450, and forged triple clamps brings lots of chassis comfort to the red Austrian ride. Handling is consistent and confidence-inspiring with plenty of front-wheel traction. With modifications to sharpen its power delivery and make the suspension firmer, the GasGas could likely be a top 3 finisher, but in a comparison of stock motorcycles, it doesn't suit the widest range of riders, which holds it back in the overall standings. Grabbing 4th place is the Husqvarna FC 450. With a Dunlop D404 street tire on its rear wheel, Husky's flagship motocrosser spun 53.7 horsepower and 33.2 pound-feet of torque on our in-house dyno, which puts it third in peak horsepower and fourth in maximum torque. Although it doesn't pull quite as hard on the top end compared to the prior generation model, the FC450 boasts more mid-range and has a good balance of throttle response, roll-on control, and all-out power. Low-end grunt is less snappy than the KTM due to its plugged-up airbox, which contributes to the Husqvarna having the second mellowest power delivery of the bikes gathered here, even in the more aggressive Map 2. Shifting is improved over the 2022 model, and the new quick shifter works well, but is a little notchy. There's also a noticeable amount of engine braking. Since 2021, Husqvarna has spec'd the FC450 with a 10mm lower suspension setup than the KTM 450 SXF, which gives it the lowest measured seat height of 36.8 inches. The WP Exact 48mm air fork and WP Exact shock are a bit soft and offer a plush feel when hitting small bumps, but ride in a firm part of the stroke when hitting larger consecutive bumps. Fork bottoming resistance is better than ever thanks to new hydro stops, but they make it difficult to use all the stroke, which is even more of a disadvantage on a bike that has less suspension travel to begin with. Shock movement feels restricted and reaches a hard spot under light to medium loads, then can break through under heavy loads or when hitting G-outs. We like that the low and high speed compression adjusters on the new shock can be adjusted by hand, but the plastic piece that covers them is a hindrance to tuning and seems like a design afterthought. Weighing in at 240 pounds wet on the Dirt Rider scales, Husqvarna's flagship motocross bike gained 5 pounds over last year's model. It does feel heavier than the previous generation platform and isn't quite as agile, most notably when changing lines and entering corners, but retains a good balance between turning and stability. A slim midsection facilitates rider movement, and the Pro Taper handlebar offers more flex than the Necken units on the other Austrian machines. Husqvarna's FC450 is a solid choice for vet riders and those who are 5'6" and shorter, but individuals outside of those demographics may find the orange option to be a better fit. Rounding out the podium is the KTM 450 SXF. On the Dirt Rider dyno, it churned out 54.3 horsepower and 33.8 pound-feet of torque, placing it second in peak horsepower and third in maximum torque. Despite its heavier feeling engine character, the 450 SXF has the most consistent power band from bottom to top. Low end is middle of the road and sufficient for most, especially in the harder hitting Map 2. The well-rounded power delivery helps make it easy to ride for long periods of time. With 2 maps, traction control, launch control, and a quick shifter, KTM shares some of the best engine tunability in the class with Husqvarna. Just like its Austrian relatives, the 450 SXF is spec'd with a Brembo hydraulic clutch, which offers a smooth pull at the lever and is super consistent. Both the WP Exact 48mm air fork and WP Exact shock now feature toolless clicker adjustability, which is a convenient feature for trackside tuning. Plus, the low and high speed compression adjusters on the shock body are more easily accessible than the Husqvarna's. The KTM suspension rides in a higher, plusher part of the stroke than the Husqvarna's, which gives it more overall comfort for a wider range of rider weights and skill levels. Fork bottoming resistance is outstanding, but we would gladly trade some of it to be able to use more of the travel. The components are balanced, but the shock is sensitive to ride height. KTM's suspension setup suits an intermediate to pro level rider quite well, while still being plenty tunable for those of novice ability. With its complete revamp, KTM's 450 motocross bike gained 4 pounds over last year for a measured wet weight of 239 pounds, but it's still the second lightest bike in the class behind the GasGas. Although it feels heavier than before and is less nimble, the 450 SXF still handles quite neutrally and is one of the most stable. It doesn't steer as accurately as the prior generation model, but still has the ability to cut down in corners and change direction just fine. Like the Husqvarna, it boasts a comfortable ergonomics package, except for the handlebar and seat being a little wide for some test riders' liking. Brembo manufactures the most powerful dirt bike brakes on the market, which are a standout feature of the Austrian trio. KTM's new generation flagship motocrosser is better in some ways and not as good in others, so the 2023 platform can be viewed as a lateral move in the grand scheme of things. For a bike that has so much going for it to begin with, that's enough to keep it on the shootout podium for yet another year. Taking the runner-up spot is the Kawasaki KX450. With 51.9 horsepower and 32.6 pound-feet of torque, Team Green's flagship motocrosser makes the least peak horsepower and torque of the bikes gathered here. On the track, the KX450 engine has an ideal balance of power and control. It isn't scary fast or intimidating. quick throttle response and a lively engine character make it playful and fun to ride, especially with the aggressive EFI coupler plugged in. Power delivery is predictable and easy to manage throughout the RPM range. Bottom end hit is second strongest in the class, and engine braking and vibration are minimal. Clutch pull from the Nissan hydraulic system is light and smooth. Equipped with a Showa 49mm coil spring fork and Showa shock, Kawasaki's suspension setting is right in the ballpark off the showroom floor. It's well balanced aside from the fork being a little soft once broken in, which is noticeable on heavier impacts such as when overjumping or coming up short. Aside from that, the Showa components are just about spot on. They offer lots of comfort, are easy to tune, and don't require much adjusting to find an ideal setting. Hitting the Dirt Rider scales at 244 pounds wet, the Green Machine is the second heaviest entry in this comparison, and just 1 pound lighter than the Honda CR450R. Still, it's nimble and easy to maneuver. With an ideal balance of cornering and stability, the Kawasaki's handling is very neutral. It's also predictable, which is a huge plus on powerful 450 machinery. Once again, Kawasaki leads in the ergonomics department. Every part of the bodywork is slim, including the radiator shrouds, midsection, and side number plates. The cockpit is not overly open, but not cramped either, and the seat is both comfortable and flat. Brakes are an area that could be improved, as the front is the weakest of the bunch and the rear is touchy due to its oversized 250mm rotor, which causes the rear brake to lock up too easily and the engine to stall if the rider isn't careful. The KX450 is an excellent motocross bike, which is why it's won this comparison the past 4 years. Although our criticisms of it are rather trivial, we've mentioned them for quite some time now. A firmer fork setting and a less touchy rear brake have been on our want list since 2019. Also, Kawasaki's EFI coupler system was first released on KX models in 2012. It's time for Team Green to spec a handlebar-mounted engine map select button. Clinching the victory in Dirt Rider's 2023 450 Motocross Shootout is the Yamaha YZ450F. The Blue Crew pulled out all the stops with its fully overhauled flagship motocrosser, and it paid off in a big way. On our in-house dyno, the YZ450F produced 54.4 horsepower and 32.7 pound-feet of torque. With these figures, it makes the most peak horsepower and ranks 5th in maximum torque. To say the blue bike is fast would be an understatement. Although smoother down low than the 2022 model, throttle control is required on the stock map settings, but some adjustment with Yamaha's free Power Tuner app helps keep the front wheel down when twisting grip. Because the YZ450F has the strongest low-end power in the class, it's the easiest to ride at gear high, which helps with controlling power and keeping the chassis calm. Some would prefer an even more linear power delivery to make it easier to manage, which can be done with the Power Tuner app, but only to a certain extent. The clutch is still cable actuated and works well, and for those who prefer a hydraulic, a complete hydraulic clutch system is available through GYTR, which retails for around $300. Yamaha's KYB SSS 48mm coil spring fork and KYB shock return on its all-new 450 motocross platform and are still the best components around. A performance-based setup means the harder you ride, the better it works. That's also when the plush feel Yamaha's suspension is known for becomes most noticeable. Bumps of any size and big impacts are no match for the KYB units due to how progressive they are. According to the Dirt Rider scales, the all-new Yamaha weighs 242 pounds wet, which means it shed 5 pounds over the 2022 model. That weight loss is noticeable when riding, as the YZ is more maneuverable than ever and corners with less rider input. Although less stable than previous years, it's still quite predictable, especially when running 105mm of sag. Ergonomics are significantly improved. The radiator shrouds and fuel tank are no longer obtrusive due to how much narrower they are, and the rider triangle is also better proportioned, which makes it easier to move forward on the seat and transition from sitting to standing. A minor criticism is that we would like the top of the seat to be flatter rather than slightly rounded. Yamaha's YZ450F is a winner because it boasts the most powerful engine, top-notch suspension, a nimble chassis, 5-pound weight loss, and agreeable ergonomics. Plus, its updated Power Tuner app continues to be the benchmark of dirt bike EFI tunability. So that wraps up Dirt Rider's 2023 450 Motocross Shootout, with the Yamaha YZ450F taking a close victory over the Kawasaki KX450 thanks to its all-new platform. Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.